It's summer vacation, and you are driving down the west coast of Nova Scotia. Your destination is Yarmouth, where you'll explore its beaches and historic streets. The drive allows you to be mesmerized by seaside communities and ocean views. With the car windows down and Celtic music playing, quaint towns dot the landscape like sea glass, each one a charming blend of colorful cottages and weather-beaten fish shacks. The breeze greets you, carrying the unmistakable scent of salt air. The sun glistens on the water's surface, creating a sparkling pathway to the horizon. Lobster traps rest on wharfs, waiting to be released into the water, a symbol of the area's lifeline. Picturesque village signs welcome those who pass through, urging them to stop and explore. You can hear the sound of laughter and chatter as locals gather to share stories. Excitement builds as you see Yarmouth unfold before you. It looks like something from a Hallmark movie. You find a place to park and get out to stroll along Main Street and its kaleidoscope buildings. The array of bright and beautiful colors bring a smile to your face. Further down Main Street, you see a 2-story brick building that looks unused and almost abandoned. As you approach it, you have trouble catching your breath. That's when you look at the dark windows and begin to hear the sound of someone crying out. You stop for a moment to listen. That's when you hear a scream. I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Join me as I share the story of the Old Yarmouth County Jail. Located on the western tip of Nova Scotia, along the Bay of Fundy is Yarmouth. It is the heart of Acadian culture in the region. Acadians are the descendants of French settlers who first arrived in what became eastern Canada between 1604 and 1755. They established colonies with rich farmland and became allies with the Mi'kmaq. During the 7 Years' War, the British and New England militant expelled many of them from the area by force in what would be known as the Great Expulsion. The British ordered 10,000 people to be deported from Nova Scotia. Many were sent as far away as New Orleans as they sought refuge in Spanish Louisiana. The expulsion proved to be unnecessary on military grounds and was later judged to be inhumane and continues to be a sad part of Nova Scotia's history. The town was settled by New Englanders from Massachusetts beginning in 1761. They were enticed by the offer of free land grants by the British government, which wanted to populate Nova Scotia with loyalists. Essentially, they were to fill up vacant lands. 100 years went by, and by the mid-1850s, Yarmouth's population had grown significantly thanks to shipbuilding, maritime trade, and fishing. As people became successful, they built elaborate homes in the small town, many of which still stand today. On a spacious corner lot at Main and King Streets, in the center of town, the courthouse and jail were constructed in 1865, with unobstructed views of the harbor. The large piece of land also accommodated an enclosed yard where prisoners would break rocks during the day and where gallows were built for executions. The building has a deep red brick facade with a small gabled roof and tall symmetrical windows. The architecture embraces a Gothic Revival style, characterized by pointed arches, while the heavy stone gives the building a sense of strength and power. When the jail opened, it contained living quarters for the jailer and his family. Inside, there was a grand granite staircase leading to an intricately carved archway framed by a silver-toned door. There were 19 cells that were cold and devoid of color, with an iron bed frame and straw mattress. Prisoners would have no bed sheets or pillows. When not in their cells, they would be found breaking rocks down to the gravel to be used on the town streets. In 1901, an inspection declared the Old Yarmouth Jail the finest jailhouse in Nova Scotia, and prisoners included those convicted of crimes and those awaiting trial. One of the most notable trials took place in the adjoining courthouse in 1922. Omar P. Roberts was a 68-year-old woodsman and trapper. He lived in North Kentsville, which is 227 kilometers away, or about 2.5 hours from Yarmouth. It's now known as Birchvale and is located in the Annapolis Valley, known for its rich soils and architectural history. Omar Roberts shared the family home, a large 2-story structure, with his wife, Clara. He was highly respected by residents throughout the county and had established very lucrative businesses. Hundreds of fishermen from the Maritimes and New England would stay in one of Omar's many lodges, including the cabin he owned about 100 kilometers from Yarmouth, deep in the back country of Digby County. His properties were so well known that eventually they became part of a fishing lodge that had welcomed visitors such as Hollywood movie stars Greta Garbo, baseball legend Babe Ruth, and former U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt, just to name a few. Omar Roberts was considered to be the finest fishing guide in Nova Scotia. I unearthed a photo of Omar during my research through findagrave.com. In it, you find a blurry and grainy black and white image that shows a very thin man with a weather-beaten face. His gray hair is messy, and he has a large gray mustache covering his top lip. I'm not sure when it was taken, but I assume it was around the time when he made the front pages of newspapers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. On September 19, 1921, Clara died. Now a widower, Omar Roberts retreated from society to lead a strange life. He had loved his wife very much, but shortly after her death, he proposed to a young lady 3 times. When she didn't accept, he began to live a rather solitary life. Without a woman to help him with the upkeep, the large family home became too much for him, and he needed to find someone to take care of it. So he hired a local woman, 19-year-old Flora Gray, as an assistant housekeeper in February of 1922. Flora was beautiful, with long dark hair, a warm smile, and a friendly personality. Flora would cook and clean for Omar and the many fishermen staying at the home, and in return, she received room, board, and a salary. The house was always full of people and filled with activity. The busy home kept Flora occupied while she was under the supervision of Omar's daughter. Omar watched her work so efficiently and joyfully, and he became infatuated. Without his daughter looking, he made constant, unwanted propositions toward Flora, which she always would reject kindly for fear of her employment. On the evening of Tuesday, August 28, 1922, Omar and Flora attended a neighbor's house for a get-together with other people from the surrounding farms. Outside William and Jessie Randall's home, Flora was seen on a tree swing with other young people and talking. Omar was inside, sitting in the kitchen with William and Jessie Randall. Omar, however, kept an eye on what Flora was doing and who she was sharing her time with. Just after 9 p.m., Omar told the Randalls that it was time for him to head home. He went outside to where Flora was sitting and asked her if she would be leaving with him. Flora replied, not just yet, that she wanted to stay and chat a while longer. Omar then left to walk the half a mile back to his home in North Kentville. Flora stayed behind with Ranson Randall, Mark Bradley, and a few other friends. About a half an hour later, around 10 p.m., Ranson Randall, offered to walk Flora home. He would later state under oath that the walk only took 10 to 15 minutes. As they walked towards Omar's family home, Ranson said the house was pitch black except for the light in Omar's room. He said that he watched Flora enter the house and light a lantern. He then saw her enter the pantry to soak some oatmeal for the next morning and then walk to her room. Confident that everything was well, Ranson turned around and walked back to his family farm. He was barely back when at about 10:45 p.m. that night, Omar arrived at the Randall farm in his car honking the horn. He ran up to the house and poked his head through an open window just as William Randall was going to bed and said, quote, "I think Flora is gone," end quote. William Randall asked, quote, "Where is she gone?" end quote. Omar replied, quote, "I suspect she's burnt up. I imagine she toppled over the lamp. The fire is in her end of the house. Call the hired hand," end quote. That's when William Randall noticed that the bottom of Omar's feet were badly burned. He hopped in his car with Omar to drive to the burning home. When they arrived, William said he entered the smoke-filled house in an attempt to save Flora. He found her by the distressing gurgling sounds she was making. The intense heat from the fire was too much, and William had to retreat. Meanwhile, Avery Gray, the hired hand, said he arrived at the burning house at 11 p.m. and ran inside and up the stairs. He made it to Flora's room and found her hiding under the bed, naked. Avery made note of the strange smell in the room. It was a mixture of burnt flesh and oil. He picked up Flora and carried her out of the burning house safely. She was severely burnt, and most of her flesh was falling off. At 1 a.m., Dr. G.W.T. Farish arrived to attend to Flora. He later testified that Flora was in and out of consciousness as he tended to her for almost 3 hours until she finally succumbed to her injuries. Flora Gray was dead by 4 a.m. She died from a large blood clot in her heart caused by the shock from the extensive burns. But before she passed away, she told the doctor, quote, "Omar had come into her room and spilled gasoline on the floor and torched a match to it. He made advances toward me, and when I rejected him, he threw gasoline over my bed and set it on fire," end quote. Dr. Ferris testified he then turned his attention to Omar's injuries and asked him if the fire was caused by defective fuel or an overturned lamp. To which Omar replied, "Neither." Both men then watched Omar's family home burn to the ground. By the time the last embers were extinguished, word had traveled to Yarmouth and to the ears of Crown Prosecutor Robert McKay. He immediately called Provincial Constable James McMillan and ordered him to go to North Kentville to investigate Flora's death. When the constable arrived, he observed the scene and arrested Omar, who was brought to the Yarmouth County Jail. A trial was set, and before Justice of the Peace Alan M. Gates, Omar stated, quote, "He did not know why he committed the awful deed," end quote. Led by Reverend L.B. Wright of the United Baptist Church, Flora Gray's funeral was very well attended. After the service, her father, Clarence Gray, had her casket moved to the front lawn of the family home so people could pay their last respects. People were shocked by the extent of her burns. Local women cried, while the men were angry. Flora Gray was buried the next day, on Wednesday, August 29th, in the Kempville Corner Cemetery. The Star of Phoenix newspaper, published in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, on August 30th, 1922, wrote, quote, Flora and Omar were the only ones in the house at the time, and as evidence points to him as perpetrating the crime, we can come to the conclusion that Omar Roberts was the cause of her death." End quote. The trial began on September 22, 1922, and concluded later that afternoon. After a one-day trial, the jury deliberated for 32 minutes and returned with a guilty verdict. Even before his trial began, Omar was quoted in several newspapers saying that, quote, "jealousy was his motive that compelled him to commit the crime," end quote. Justice Chisholm of the Nova Scotia Supreme Court sentenced him to death. Omar Roberts would be hanged on Friday, November 24, 1922. In the days and weeks leading up to his execution, Omar prayed in his tiny cell at the Yarmouth Jail and begged God for forgiveness. For some unknown reason, the jail did not hire a professional executioner, as was the norm across Canada. Instead, Sheriff Lewis was given the grim task of conducting the execution. A wooden gallows was constructed in the prison yard. Overlooking the harbor, the steps would lead Omar Roberts to the top of the small yet sturdy structure. In the center was the trap door, ready to swing open with the simple pull of a lever. Directly overhead, wooden beams stretched across the top where a noose would hang to wrap around Omar's neck. At 7 a.m. on Friday morning, November 24, 1922, Omar left his jail cell inside the Yarmouth County Jail for the last time. He walked the short distance, walked up the steps, and felt a black hood cover his head as a noose was placed around his neck. With a swift pull of the lever, the sheriff sealed Omar Roberts' fate. After his death, Roberts was buried next to his wife Clara in Yarmouth Mountain Cemetery. It is located about a 5-minute walk or 8 blocks away from the jail. Omar Roberts was the last person hung in Yarmouth. In 2004, the Southwest Nova Scotia Correctional Centre opened just down the road, and the Yarmouth Jail ceased operations. For many years, the old prison sat empty. When people walked by it, they would always get an eerie feeling, so much so that people crossed the street in order to avoid it, even today. While the Old Yarmouth Jail is closed to the public, in 2014, Mandy Renahan, a businesswoman and former resident, purchased the old jail from an American couple for less than $60,000. The founder and CEO of Freshco was born and raised in Yarmouth and remembered walking by the jail every day. She had hopes of renovating the historic building, but by 2020, she decided to host a contest to give the jail away for free. In September of 2020, Dan Gibson was declared the winner. Gibson said in an interview with the Chronicle Herald that, quote, he plans to renovate the jail and turn it into a social enterprise hub, including an upscale restaurant, community performing arts space, and hub for small businesses, end quote. Whatever ends up happening to the building, the new owners should know that for years, people have reported strange occurrences inside the old jail. Faucets in the bathroom turn on and off all by themselves, while others have felt temperatures go from hot to cold without reason. Others have heard the sounds of moaning and shrieking cries coming from the basement, along with the sounds of rocks being hammered. There are even reports of the smell of burning flesh coming from inside. People have reported seeing the apparition of an old woman wandering the hallways of the old jail late at night. One of the most well-known ghosts might even be Omar Roberts. His spirit is still believed to be trapped within the prison wall, and he can be heard in the halls throughout the Yarmouth Jail crying out in pain. While Omar Roberts may be the last person hanged in Yarmouth, it is believed by many that there are other spirits that still call the old jail home. So the next time you're in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, venture to the corner of Main and King Street. Stand on the sidewalk to admire the beauty and the history of the old jail. Just make sure you stand on the other side of the street. Who knows? If you're real quiet, you might even hear the cries of Omar Roberts crying out to you from beyond the veil. Thank you for joining me as we explore the Old Yarmouth Jail in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link it in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer, Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnson, with help from Rosin Kufer. If you would like to support this podcast, please follow and share. And if you can give us a like and a 5-star written review, that is always appreciated. Also, you can follow me on our different social media platforms, or if you have a ghost story, haunting, or true crime that you would like for us to cover on this podcast, please email me through the website hauntedcanada.com. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.